Are you ready to live through the winter without utilities? Let's talk about some ideas.
Hey Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan, and today we're talking about the possibility of living without utilities in the wintertime. And this might be a short-term event, maybe a few hours to a few days, or it might be a longer-term event, which might be weeks or months. Being ready for this is critically important.
Years ago, we decided that we couldn't teach something that we hadn't lived. And so we turned off the power in our house in January, back when we had a bunch of little children. I learned several things in there. In fact, we have an entire video that kind of goes through some of the things that we learned. It could be very helpful, and we'll leave a link for that. I learned that I'm not a nice person when I'm cold, and I'm not productive. Being warm is important.
To show you how important that was, when we were building this house, the wood stove went in before a lot of the walls and other things. It's challenging when it's cold and when it's really, really cold.
He's tougher than I am, right? And that's one of the things that you have to understand is that who's living in your home. If you have small children or elderly or somebody who's immune compromised like I am, that means that they are much more sensitive to changes, whether it's hot or cold, and we have to take special precautions for them because not everybody can be a tough old guy like John and just be okay no matter what and wear shorts all the time. The first thing that we want to talk about is actually how to stay warm, and I want to show you how important this is to me. So just recently, in fact, just last night on our Costco trip, they had these like little snuggly things, right, that you can just wear around the house, and it's got a hood and it's made of polyester, and it can really help to keep me warm. And so what did I do? Of course I bought it because I want to stay warm. And then different things like this, like just this hat with this goes over your face, nice warm gloves. And think about it, you're not always going to be outside. So do I need ski gloves inside my house? No, but I'm going to need some kind of, well, hopefully not, but I'm going to need some kind of warm gloves. When Christy was in Chile for a year and a half, and she wanted to know what I wanted her to bring me home for a souvenir, what was it? It's a poncho so that I can wear it and stay warm.
We need to make sure that we can do the best to make our home habitable. Now, in our last video on winter preparedness, we talked about sealing things up, but if you happen to be in this situation and you haven't done these things, you need to take some steps. There's plastic and tape that you can use to insulate your windows and seal up gaps. There's kits like this at the hardware store that are just shrink window coverings that you can put on. Now, I should warn you, these work best when they're warm. That tape doesn't stick very well when it's cold. So
you have to do a blow dryer. You have to heat shrink it.
Right.
So if you wait for your power to go off, this
might be a challenge putting that on.
Challenge or maybe even useless. Having painter's tape for the plastic or the visqueen is really important.
It is. Like I said, you can seal gaps and cracks. If you've got a door that you're not going to use, put tape around those edges because those are weak spots where you're going to get a little bit of cold air in. And of course your windows, using some plastic and then using this, you don't want to use duct tape because it'll tear the paint off and just makes a mess. But this is much, much better. So it's a very handy tool, very inexpensive.
One of the other things is if the power does go out, sometimes it's best just to find a room that you're going to live in and you're going to isolate that from the rest of the home. And that's where you use your emergency heating. And sometimes that means you might need to put blankets up over a hallway or a doorway or something so that you are just conserving all of that heat, both the heat that comes from our bodies, because people help to warm things, and the heat from an alternative heat source.
You may want to have some tools on hand. I love the Buddy heater, puts out a lot of heat. Of course, you're using fuel, and that fuel, if you don't have a supply of it, it's going to run out. I love the Vesta. The Vesta is a combination cooker heater, and it has a built-in fan that doesn't need any batteries. It's a Peltier device. This acts as a really nice little heater, and that fuel stores probably more easily.
Safer.
It's safer. And in the event that you don't have gas, but you have electricity, have a an electric heater that you can use. Conversely, you do have gas, but you don't have electricity, something like a gas fireplace. There's a lot of those that will still work without power, or you can hook it up to a power station to provide just a little bit of power. It just won't work as well if you're not using the fan.
Some of them won't turn on anymore if you don't have electricity. You need to know how that works, and you need to figure it out in advance, because when the power goes out and when you're really cold, that's not the time to find out that if you would have had one little part, that you could have done something to make it work. We talk about these little devices, and remember, they don't work without fuel. If you can, it's really good to put something permanent in your home. We have a masonry heater that is out in our gathering building that we have out there, our little metal building, that is amazing. And I love that, but it's really pricey. The wood burning stove that we have, like John said, we put it in before we built a house because I don't ever want to be cold again. But if we don't have wood for that, it's of no value at all. So make sure that you've stored your fuel safely and that you have fuel stored.
And make sure that you have smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. The safety guy always has to put that message in there because it's so important. When the polar vortex hit the South and Texas especially, a lot of people died because they were doing things in their home they shouldn't have been doing, and there was carbon monoxide that killed several people. So having these alarms will sometimes alert us that we're being stupid, or maybe just something's gone wrong. We just always need to have those in working condition.
And if any of these are out of your price range and you just don't have money, we have an entire video on how to light and heat using candles. It is not the optimal way to do it, but man, let me tell you, when you are really, really cold, just the flames that can come from a little candle heater can make a big difference.
And let's not forget the tent. Just having that tent, you create a microenvironment that allows everyone to stay so much warmer in there.
And if you don't have a tent and you can't afford a tent, think it through. What about just putting a blanket over your kitchen table and creating kind of a tent, and then moving whatever you can underneath there so that you can be comfortable and sleep, and yet you've got that microenvironment that's going to keep that heat in there so that you can sleep warmer.
Similarly, you could do that with bunk beds.
Yeah, you could.
You could put a blanket over there and create an enclosed space.
And, you know, it might mean that you bring the dog or the cat and to provide some warmth. You know, just kind of think it through and plan. When you're out shopping, if you don't have what you need, now might be a really good time to get it, because when you need it, it's too late.
Number 2, let's talk about food and water. And I know you're going to say, yeah, you always hound us about food and water. Well, I do. But in the winter without utilities, food and water are absolutely critical. If you get dehydrated, you are going to be so much colder and have so many more problems. So you need to make sure that you're consuming plenty of water and, of course, calories. We need calories that come from food, but it can't be beans and rice. We've got to have things that are simple. So tell us more about that, Mama.
Yeah, so like he's saying about the beans and rice, if all I have is this Vesta, I'm going to want to have foods where I can boil water and simmer foods and it's done very, very quickly, or foods that don't have to be cooked at all, like these protein bars or a can of soup. I can eat this cold right out of there, but I'm going to be a lot happier if I can heat this up. Now, if you have a wood burning stove, yes, you could absolutely cook some of the other stuff. I just was on the phone yesterday with Christy, and we do a lot of freeze drying, and I know not everybody can do that, but freeze dried foods would be a great option for this emergency type situation. This is just some freeze dried chili that we had leftovers from one of the meals that we did, and we freeze dried chili. I sent a bag home with Christy, and she called me yesterday, and she had just poured water into it, right, and brought it to a boil. She loved it, and I'm like, well, how did it taste? What did you think? And she's like, it's just like the day that we made it. This is some Cafe Rio black beans that we had done one day. Same thing. I can take this from this dried state with some boiling water, and within just a few minutes, have a meal ready to go. This is actually the refried beans and rice and pico that we mixed together to put inside of burritos. Add hot water, it's great. Now there are commercial freeze-dried foods that you can get.
And let me just say something on some of these. You can actually use cold water.
If you have to.
I mean, if you had to. The important thing is that you get the calories in, but definitely a lot better warm.
You have to have water stored. They're edible without water, but they're going to dehydrate you. That is one of the big things. If you don't have a lot of water stored, you're going to want to store all canned goods like canned soups and canned fruits and canned vegetables that have that liquid in them. Hot drinks, hot cocoa, teas, whether it's coffee, whatever it is that you like to drink warm, make sure that you have that, because as you drink the warm liquids and the warm foods, it heats you from the inside out, and that really changes things. So make sure that even if this isn't the way that you eat all the time, make sure that you have plenty of these kinds of foods just in case your power goes out.
And just a quick thought on the water. Hopefully you will continue to have your city water or whatever water system you're on, but you have to recognize that you may not. So having water stored, again, is just so critical.
When they had the polar vortex in Texas, people were like trying to get the snow and to melt it. But think about this. You have to have a lot of snow. It melts down into a very small amount of water. And not that that's a bad idea, it's a good idea, but you also have to be able to melt it, so you have to have the fuel. Wow, how much easier would it be if you just took some time and made sure that you had plenty of water stored someplace in your house, even if it's underneath a bed, so that you don't have to go through all of that when you're trying to manage a whole bunch of other things too. Number 3 is being able to cook your food. Personally, I think it's really important that you're able to cook both indoors and outdoors. Sometimes we think, oh, I can just always use my propane grill outside or one of my outside devices. But the truth is, in the wintertime, sometimes it is just too stormy to be doing your Dutch oven cooking. All of these are good, right? Your Dutch oven cooking or anything outside that I would love to do actually, I'd love to be using my sun oven.
Absolutely.
And if that's possible, that's fantastic. But sometimes it's just not possible. So you've got your outdoor devices and you've got your indoor devices. For cooking indoors, my favorite is canned heat. And the reason why, these are little 6-hour cans. You can buy them online, and we'll leave a link to where you can get them. But the cheapest place to buy them is actually at Sam's Club in the catering section. You can buy 12 of these cans for about $20, and you can use them in all different ways. You can use them in these little folding camp stoves. My favorite way is to actually use them in the Vesta, because the Vesta will hold 3 of these cans. One of these cans will just heat it slowly, and you'll need to make sure that you always have a lid on to conserve the energy, but it will bring it to a little boil, just a little, like I see little 7-Up kind of bubbles in there. That's the best that it will do. But if you put 2 of them together, you can get a good rolling boil. And if you have 3 of them, they work really fast. That's one of the reasons why I love the Vesta. This is called the Inferno Pro. Outside, it's amazing because you can just use little sticks and twigs,
charcoal, whatever,
to be able to cook your food. But inside, you can use it with 1 can of safe heat. So it's gonna be just like these inside. Outside, it's an amazing tool. This is the Ember. And the Ember, I absolutely love it because I can bake using canned heat. The canned heat goes right in there, and then you close it up, and it will bake inside your house. The other thing about it is they've designed it so that instead of using safe heat, you can actually use sticks and twigs or charcoal to be able to bake outside. Safe heat is good for cooking inside, but you cannot use charcoal or sticks or twigs or anything like that inside because it produces dangerous amounts of carbon monoxide. So don't do it. But some of these devices are good for using both indoors and outdoors. The Vesta is actually one of my very favorite things because I can both cook on it and heat with it. And so you only need one little device that can truly take care of your emergency needs. Yeah. So cooking, think about cooking and how you're going to heat your food.
Number 4 is light. It's dangerous to stumble around in the dark. And so having some source of light is really quite critical. It's a safety thing. It's a comfort thing too. And so having some source of light. Now, we absolutely love the hybrid lights. They're probably our absolute favorites. These sit in a window, so they're just kind of continually charging, and they do a wonderful job for us.
One of the things that I really like about the hybrid lights is that they are very durable. The grandkids can play with them, and they still provide me with the light that I need. John has a headlamp, which is really good for task lighting. This one is great because it has the magnets on the bottom, or it has this little hook. The problem with flame light is that it's dangerous. Once this fuel is exhausted, it's exhausted. And these are renewable. Don't get me wrong, I think this is okay, but it doesn't provide a lot of light. It does provide a little bit of heat.
Right.
And the heat that it provides can be a blessing. So we have both, but if I could only have one, I would definitely do the hybrid light.
Yeah. And you can also get flashlights and batteries, whatever works for you and is within your budget. That's great. I wanted to mention on this is one of the things when we turned off our power. This was one of the big lessons that we learned. We thought, well, we've got all these candles. We'll put these candles around. Duh. There's kids and wives that love to play in fire, and it's like, hold on.
Everything in there. I'm like, stop.
It took us very little time to realize that was not a good solution. We hadn't thought that through very well.
But make sure that you've got some plan to keep your world lit when the power goes out.
Number 5 is alternative energy. And we'll put a video in that you can look at that will help you evaluate this a little bit. But alternative energy is important, especially for those who have medical equipment that they need or other critical loads. You have to size whatever you get to meet that need. Now, whether that's a solar power system that you install or that you have available to put in place, or these little power stations, or a generator, whatever it is, decide what it is that you need to meet your critical needs, and then make sure you have whatever you need to do that. If you have a generator, you need to have fuel to run that generator, and you need to remember that that has to be used out away from the house, because that puts off lots and lots of carbon monoxide that is deadly. A few years ago, there was a couple in our area that put the generator in the garage and just had the door open enough to get the cord in to run their oxygen concentrators. And they both asphyxiated and died. And it's just so sad. It's just such a deadly thing. You have to be careful of that.
So we'll leave some links to some of the different videos that we've done on that, because Jonathan's done a great job of showing you all kinds of different ways that you can use these and how to size it. And we've got a system for my mother-in-law who needed some for her medical equipment, and how we adapted things so that an 86-year-old woman who lives at home alone can make sure that she takes care of all of her needs on her own. So that was really cool. Now let's move into number 6. Number 6 is communication. And sometimes we forget about communication, but it's really important. Say a storm is coming. What's the status of the storm? Say there's been some kind of an event and you need to know what's happening out there, whether you need to stay, whether you need to go, what's going on. So we need to both be able to get information out to people that we love, like on our cell phone, which sometimes the solution can be as easy as making sure we have the ability to charge our cell phone. If everything's working, if the towers are working, your cell phone can be really important. Make sure that you have some kind of a backup radio where you can get information in case it's not, and have things set up with your family so that if you have the ability to, say, put a message out on social media, where's your family going to look for it? Where are your friends going to be able to look so that it's safe, it's confidential, it's private, but so that you might be able to communicate? We've got an entire video on that with some really good ideas on how to set up your family communication.
And that brings us to number 7, which is community. We try and hit this in a lot of videos because your community is so important to you. Getting to know your neighbors and friends, knowing those that you need to check on.
And also think about this for a second. If you have a power outage situation, maybe your friends or some of your neighbors aren't comfortable being alone. Maybe it's a good time to have people over. It helps you to be more cheerful and optimistic. Setting all that up in advance and remembering that we are all in this together, that's really important. There you have it. Those are our 7 top things that we think are important for us to work on so that we are prepared for the utilities to go out this year. I encourage you to do whatever it is that you need to do in these different categories, or any others that you might be able to think of that might make a winter power outage much more comfortable for you, your family, and your friends to be able to survive.
And now for the question of the day. What is on your to-do list so that you can be prepared to live life fully without utilities in the winter? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.